It's a big crew this morning. Well, welcome for those of you who were not here last week. We are in the second of a 4-week sermon series called Pulling Back the Curtain. This is intentional. I really appreciate the 4 of you who stopped me on your way in, or on my way into the worship center last week to tell me the curtain's open. This is on purpose, and so what we are doing is we have been looking now at demographic information. There are things that the church has access to, certain databases, things that our denomination subscribes to, and it allows us to pull data and to look at things in very specific areas. And so what I did is I pulled data from this zip code 35242 and the zip code that a number of you come from in Trustville, because those are the 2 zip codes that make up the majority of where folks in this worshiping body reside. And I wanted to look at that because I wanted it to be pertinent to our lives, our communities, our neighbors. And what I was looking at is, what are the concerns that are named when people are able to be polled anonymously, privately, and they are asked, what are the things that cause you concern or are troublesome in your life? And then I said, let's look at those, and they were ranked in order. And the number one thing, which we talked about last week when we pulled back the curtain and exposed this problem, was the fear of a health crisis. And so we talked about that, and then we talked about what is the church's response to that. How can there be a faithful response from the people of God in serving their neighbors and being aware of what's going on in their community? How can they respond? So the first 2 actually had to do with health. So I merged those into one. It's about health issues, health crises, health concerns. The second issue that was most commonly named as a concern for people, and this was on a scale of 4, I don't know why they used 4, but coming in at 3.6, number 2 on the survey was future financial fear. Future finances, in other words. Now this is interesting because these 2 zip codes would probably be regarded on a local and a national level as fairly well off. I mean, people are mostly would call themselves comfortable and not sort of hand to mouth, right? And very fortunate to be living in those kind of communities of relative affluence. We know it's not Beverly Hills, but it's certainly not among the poorest communities, right? And so why is financial future planning, fear of future finances, why are those concerning things to us? Another thing that I was able to get in the data when looking at it was what should the churches be doing in your community to address area concerns? We talked about that some too. And interestingly on the list, nowhere did it list help with financial classes. That was never a request. So it's interesting to me that the second most popular perceived problem is also something that the community says the church shouldn't necessarily be about working at this problem, fixing it, helping people through it, right? That's interesting. That's sort of telling to me. And we are probably familiar with some of the faith-based programs that help people with planning and budgeting and finances and things of that nature. But perhaps those aren't necessarily some things that people are asking for, clamoring for. And then the last thing I will share about the data on this was that there's another category, and this category says, what is it that is keeping you away from church if you are not a churchgoer? What is it that's keeping you away? The number one response, too much talk about money. This is a perplexing data set, friends. At least to me, someone who is not a data analyst. I am looking at this and saying, okay, this is the second biggest problem. Please don't talk about it. You talk about it too much. Okay. Interesting. Also, would venture to guess that I do less than 5 money-related sermons as a topic per year. It's not about me. It's not about grace. It's just about people's perceptions, right? So non-church-going folks think that the church talks too much about money, which is interesting because are they there to hear about the church not talking about whatever? But that's the perception, right? So this is an interesting set of information to try to grapple with. But here's what I think it says. It says that we have a lot of avoidance when it comes to matters of finances and that intersection with our faith, right? If the perception is that we talk about it too much, but we really don't talk about it all that much, that means that when it is talked about, it stands out, or it makes people uncomfortable, or people are uneasy about the whole thing. And it's something that people think about a lot, and enough so that they name it the second most common thing that they're concerned about after a health crisis, which is sort of interesting. And given that it comes from these 2 communities and zip codes, that's even more sort of interesting, right? So what do we do with all this? How do we wrestle with this? How do we respond? What is the faithful response to this? Now, I know that the survey said we're not asking for programs, so please don't offer us programs. But that's not a bad way of addressing an issue, is it? So here's the thing. Low-hanging fruit, low commitment. I just want to point out something to you. On the back table closest to the door today with the black tablecloth on it, there is a stack of paper. I only made about 30 of them. I can make more if we need to. But on that sheet, it lists 3 different free or at least online and available programs that you can do that will help you anonymously, privately, and in the convenience of your home and at your own schedule, do some basic financial planning exercises. I mean, we're talking about budgeting 101 and some basic exercises. And some of you are like, yeah, I'm well beyond that. And some of you are saying, you know, I've never actually done that. And that would be not a bad place to start. And on the back side of that form, it has a budgeting worksheet that you can work through. That's a tried and true resource from a trusted source. So that's available to you if you would like that. But when it comes to thinking about long-range financial things too, there's something else that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And so I want to name something I invite you to put it on your calendar and hold the date. March 12th, we are going to have a special event here at the church. It's going to be a dinner, and at that dinner, you are going to get to hear about some topics that maybe you've never confronted before, and maybe you haven't done them for years, and it's time to revisit it, and that is wills, trusts, long-range financial planning, right? Estate planning type of things. We're going to start to touch on some of those things. It's not necessarily a night that you are going to write your will, but you will come away from that thing with some resources that you can then take to a preferred attorney or someone that you trust that can help you work through that and help iron that out. And that, I hope, will pave the way to some of your long-term financial concerns. So this is available to everybody. This isn't just available to that couple that just had a child and they said, you know, we should really put together a will. Yes, it's for them, but it's also for those of you who are saying things like, you know, I haven't really ever looked back on that thing that we did decades ago. Maybe it's time to revisit that. Or are our financial goals and our priorities and our savings and our giving, are those the same now as they were when we put that in motion years ago? So an opportunity for you to come and think about that. The second part of that evening, we're going to hear from somebody who is an expert and going to talk to us about some medical end-of-life issues, like advanced directives, living will, power of attorney, things like that, things that maybe aren't the most fun things to just talk about on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, but stuff that's important and stuff that can be very, very helpful for your loved ones, particularly in a health crisis situation. See how I tied week 1 and 2 together? And so that is going to be available for free to you on the 12th of March. So would love for you to sign up or just pencil that into your calendar, and we will get more information about that to you in the coming days. We'll have that in the newsletter and the bulletin shortly. All right, Now, the other part of the financial future concern. My neighbor across the driveway, and many of you know where the parsonage is, my neighbor across the driveway didn't have their trash picked up last Thursday. What that means is I see the boxes of all of their Christmas gifts for the last week. And I really like the TV that my neighbor got for Christmas. It's a 65-inch. It's the QLED thing. It's an upgrade on the TV that I have, which, by the way, is perfectly fine. I have a couple TVs. They work great. There's no need to replace them. And yet, every time I leave my driveway, I look at that and go, that looks like a nice television. His kid's also got a new scooter. But anyway, so the thing is part of what happens when you live in suburban America is that it is easy to subconsciously get caught up in this, as we all call it, the keeping up with the Joneses idea, right? And it starts off for a good reason, right? You buy into a neighborhood that maybe is a stretch for you, especially early on, and you say, that's an investment, or those are the kinds of schools that I want to get my child into. And this is a hard thing that's going to require some sacrifices now, but it may be better off later for us in the end, right? We have these conversations at home. Lots of us have had these conversations. And this is part of the way that we think. But then what happens is we end up being in communities where we just keep seeing people that have more and newer and the latest and the newest edition, right? And all of a sudden that car that was working great looked really awesome to you until the newer model came in and they totally redid the body design, and now you realize that you're the one on the block with the 5-year-old version, which wasn't detectable until they came out with the new body style, right? Or the guy across the street has the new TV and yours is perfectly fine. And these things sort of seep into us, and we see these things around us, and they are as persistent and bothersome to many of us. And the way that our brains think about this is these pop-up advertisements that seem to know exactly what we want to shop for, and they don't go away until we buy the thing, right? And we know that this is a problem because people keep saying that it's a problem. And my generation, Generation X, carries the most debt of any generation, which is interesting. The average Gen Xer carries $9,000 debt from month to month on their credit card. It is a problem, and we don't like to talk about it. We'd probably rather talk about just about anything else than admitting that we might have some financial concerns, or that we might be in a little bit over our head, or that we might keep debting on things so that we give the impression or the appearance that we're succeeding greatly. Stephen talked the Sunday before New Year's. And I love this example that he gave, but he said, as we look to the new year, the Magi looked to the star, but what was under the star? What was the problem or the issue below the thing? If we look at the keeping up with the Joneses idea and the debt problem that we have and the fear of our financial future, what is the problem below that? And the problem below that probably says, I want to be seen as successful. I want to be seen as an equal. I don't want to be perceived as a fraud living in the neighborhood that I live in. Or you get the idea, right? And it's about an insecurity within so many of our lives that continues to be a problem. And until we address that insecurity, we may not be able to fix our spending and our debt issues, and our spending and our debt issues are going to hang over us like a black cloud and keep making this fear of the financial future continue to be a problem because we haven't addressed the smaller things closer to today that will impact things later on down the road for tomorrow. And in response to this, and all this bevy of concerns around money, Jesus issues one masterful parable and sermon. He says there was once this guy, and he had a great year. His fields were bursting, crops are overflowing. And he said, I'm going to tear down, I'm going to remodel, and I'm going to build a bigger facility to store my stuff. Why? So that one day, maybe sooner rather than later, I can put my feet up and not have to think about anything. Jesus then goes on to say that night the man's life ends. What were you doing this for? It's the whole hearses don't have luggage racks kind of thing, right? And I appreciate that part, but I even like more what comes next. By worrying, will you add a day to your life? Has having more and more ever made you more and more happy? Do you ever realize what it's like to have enough and that accumulating more doesn't do anything for you? I feel like he's saying, has the TV ever made you that much happier? Look at the birds. Look at the ravens. Look at the lilies. They have everything that they need. They don't worry about it. If God cares for them, provides for them, they have their basic needs cared for, doesn't God value you more than a flower or a bird? Do you see that there's an opportunity for contentment? Do you see that the things that you are chasing and the insecurities that you have or this hole you're seeking to fill is something that can't be done by accumulating more or going into more debt? In fact, it's a vicious cycle that leads us in the opposite direction. Can't you see that by praising God for having enough and sharing out of your abundance and thanking God for having what you need to get by and finding contentment within that is all you need? It's like in this simple, short message, Jesus just reorients the whole thing, which has gone askew. It's a recalibration of priorities and our lives and our things, our accumulation, our shortcomings, our insecurities. He brings us back and points us to true north again. I think it's a hard thing to do because it does feel like there is constant pressure and bombardment around us at all times. And some of you have mastered this. Like some of you have already figured out, I can do simple, I can do contentment, I can do minimalism, and it's fine. But even if you've found that, you live in zip codes where people are struggling with this. So if this isn't a message directly to you, how are you going to be a better neighbor? How are you going to help and be a part of this solution? So we take these words from Jesus to heart. Jesus, once again, simple teaching, hard to follow. But he says, has worrying about your financial future ever added a day to your life? No. In fact, it might just be the opposite. So let's look this week and think more about what it means to have enough. What it means to look for contentment. And what it looks like to have a sense of peace. I would not say that this is a universal sermon. I would not go into a church comprised primarily of people who are very much struggling financially and do this. And this probably isn't a message that's landing with everybody today. But for a large number of you in suburban America, this is a concern. And I think we need to address it. We pull back the curtain on that and let some light shine on this darker subject. And I'd like to leave you with one more thought. This is from United Methodist preacher, Pastor Adam Hamilton. He wrote a book a few years ago called Enough, which is about what you think it's about. And he said, making a living is about what you get. Making a life is about what you give. Let us pray.